Yo, what's going on, guys, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be giving my thoughts on Kick-Ass 2. I talked about Kick-Ass 1 the other day, and honestly I just really raved about how much I love it and how it's like a top 10 movie for me. And when it comes to the second one, I do think it's actually still a pretty enjoyable movie, but I mean, it doesn't really touch the first one. It's just not as good, and it doesn't really up the ante in any way. It's one of those sequels where if you did really like and enjoy the first one, you're going to enjoy this one because you like the characters, but when it comes to like everything else and the actual like pacing and the plot and how everything is put together, I feel like it's a little bit bloated, which is kind of an interesting negative I have for this movie, considering when I talked about Kick-Ass 1, I actually praised it for the fact that it handled a bunch of different characters and really didn't let any of them outshine the other, and they kind of all felt like one cohesive piece to a puzzle that eventually paid off in something really dope. Whereas this movie kind of feels like a bunch of pieces that just didn't necessarily fit together correctly, even though none of them are necessarily bad. It just doesn't really come together. And like I said, it doesn't make it bad, it just makes it have obvious flaws that make me be like, okay, I mean, this is alright and fun to watch, especially again if you like the first one, but it doesn't set itself apart in any way and doesn't really make it like that Spider-Man 2 or Dark Knight type feeling really at all. Granted, that is a really high bar with those two sequels. I guess I'd compare it more to like Thor to Thor the Dark World, right? Like you have the drop off, and I know a lot of people don't really like Thor the Dark World, but for me, I enjoyed it. I just knew I didn't like it as much as the original, and that's just really how I feel about Kick-Ass 2. There are things I really love about this movie though. I like Mindy and Dave's dynamic, or Kick-Ass and Hit Girl, because I feel like they're almost in different sides of the pendulum almost with how they feel about certain things, and just kind of having to deal with shit their own way. I like that, even though it does make the movie, or kind of lead to one of the movie's problems where they feel so separated and it makes the plot feel like it's cut in two. Like to me, you have half Kick-Ass 2 and half a Hit Girl solo movie, which is not really a bad thing. I just think it needed more time to flesh that out, or straight up make it two separate movies. And by the time you get to the end, honestly, it just feels a little bit rushed. My favorite part about this movie though is easily the whole team dynamic. Like Kick-Ass's whole thing where he goes and basically tries to find more help and joins a Avengers-like team. That is easily my favorite part. I love the dynamic between all the different superheroes, or just, you know, heroes. Obviously, nobody's super in this universe, but you have so many characters that honestly are pretty good. They're not necessarily fleshed out enough to make you give a, you know, major amount of a shit, but they give you enough reason to care about all of them enough. Except for Jim Carrey as Colonel Stars and Stripes. He fucking killed it in this movie, man. I mean, honestly, is there ever a movie that Jim Carrey doesn't kill it? I know there was that weird movie with the book or something. I heard that wasn't very good, but I never watched it. Everything I've ever watched him in, Jim Carrey is amazing. I gotta call him out on something a little bit, though. Apparently, when this movie was actually, like, being, promoted, Jim Carrey said, no, there's too much violence, I don't want to fucking promote it and all this shit. It's like, bro, you saw the first one. You said you were a fan of the first one. Now all of a sudden this one is it's too violent for you. Yeah, I mean that one I can't really defend him on that one. That's pretty bitch shit. That has nothing to do with the movie. It just it always came across as so weird to me. But you know, whatever. Be that as it may, I do still really enjoy this movie, man. I mean, if I get the urge to watch Kick-Ass 1, I'm gonna get the urge to watch Kick-Ass 2 right after. I mean, that's why I'm talking about these movies within a few days of each other, because you know, Kick-Ass 2 is not like a redheaded stepchild of a sequel. It's still enjoyable, it's still fun, it just isn't a masterpiece like Kick-Ass 1, which is an insanely hard movie to follow up. I also think something that lends to this movie not being as good as the original is that the original director did not return. I mean, Matthew Vaughn was producing this movie, but they did hand the reins over to Jeff Wadlow, who I actually really like as a director. Watching some of the behind the scenes and special features, he seemed like he was having a blast, and you always have to appreciate a guy that genuinely is having just the time of his life making a movie. Like a lot of people, I hope to someday direct my own movie, and if I'm having half as much fun as this guy did directing Kick-Ass 2, well then I'm gonna have the time of my goddamn life. But there is a distinct flair that Matthew Vaughn brought to the first one, and I think it's just a little bit absent, if not completely absent in the second one, and I think it just loses a little bit of that magic that the first one had. And again, I just think that contributes to the second one overall just not being as concise and overall as good as the first one. When it comes to recommending this movie, I would recommend it to anybody that does really love the first one. I can't really recommend it straight up on its own. I do think there's some good things about it that I could, you know, kind of give you a little bit of a push to be like, yeah, I think you'd like a lot of things about this. But would I recommend Kick-Ass 2 before Kick-Ass 1? Nah, I think it really completely depends on if you love Kick-Ass 1. It's not like, you know, the one I said earlier, the comparison I made with, you know, Dark Knight and Spider-Man 2. Like, those ones you can just pick out and watch on their own. I don't feel like Kick-Ass 2 is that way for anybody that hasn't seen the first one, but it's a good continuation. Alright, I've gotten a little bit rambly, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up here. I pretty much got all my thoughts out on Kick-Ass 2, and overall, I just think it is a decent sequel that doesn't necessarily reach the heights of the first one, as I've said probably like 6 times throughout this video. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to look out for the next one, and I'll catch you later. Peace.